I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Art, the podcast where we get to know the women behind their art.
If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll show you what I mean. If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll bring you to your name. If you follow me.
My guest this week is Costumier Christiane Joy Hultquist. Christian first established her name when she collaborated with Yeah Yeah Yeah's lead singer Karen O to design her stage costumes, and she has never looked back. Christian was born in Marion, Iowa in 1973, the second of 6 children to Connie and Jim Hultquist. Her parents had their own challenges raising a family while each spending time in the prison system. Her mother became a born-again Christian and so instilled a religious upbringing in her children. She was creative, teaching them to be resourceful using DIY, a skill Christiane would later adopt in her craft. Connie was also a writer and her father a singer. Coming from a poor background, Christiane soon learned that she needed to make her own way, and while she excelled at sport in school, she had no academic ambitions. Instead, she decided to make her own way and is entirely self-taught. Aside from 1 year studying photography, she had no training to become an artist or costume designer. Once she left Iowa and headed east to Chicago, her world began to open up, and she spent time in Europe before, at the age of 24, realizing her future was destined to be in New York. It was there that she worked in retail and made the most of networking, which paid off, and it wasn't long before she met Karen O, herself a burgeoning artist. Thus began a partnership that would showcase her work on stage and give her the name recognition she needed to establish herself in the industry. Consequently, international success followed. Christiane's work has been exhibited in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the Mode Museum in Hasselt, Belgium, and the Museum of Art and Design in New York City. She's also held her first solo show at the Ava Gallery in New York. Christiane's work has been featured across all major publications, including the New York Times, Time Magazine, Vogue, Vanity Fair, The Guardian, Billboard, Spin, and Rolling Stone. Her next show will be in September 2023 at a new gallery space in New York, alongside her husband, the actor and artist Jason Grizzell. Christiane, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we were just talking about tech, and I'm wondering, with your creative eye, whether you look at IT these days and whether it informs you at all in your creativity, modern trends.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I was just thinking to myself before we got on here that I'm actually have to use a lot of my husband's iPads and stuff like that because I refuse to put apps on my phone. So I think, maybe not as much as it could. I think I sort of stay away from it a little bit. But I mean, obviously it probably does have an influence that I'm maybe just not seeing, but overall, I think probably not, I mean, I really like kind of just doing everything, by hand and stuff. So I kind of tend to do stuff more like that.
Yeah, I would imagine you rather like any of your artwork, whether it's a new costume or a piece of art, you're starting with a blank canvas every time, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely starting with a blank canvas and just sort of it kind of depends on what I'm working on. Because if it's, something for Karen O, then it's different from working on my own thing. Because, it just has to, different people are seeing it, different people are reacting to it. So, it's sort of trying, that's kind of where, how I usually kind of figure out my work is just based on that, what is for, who it's for, a lot of times.
Rather than trends or pop culture per se.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, pop, I have a lot of younger nieces and nephews, and then I have a lot of, I have some younger friends around me too. And so it's like a lot of, I have kind of found myself more influenced by pop culture recently. Like, like all the kids here are like really into like the early 2000s fashion and stuff. And a lot of my friends are vintage sellers. And so that's kind of actually, seeing that come back. At first I was like, really like, I don't want to look at that. But now that I'm starting to see it, I'm starting to see like kind of the creative ways they're putting it together. I'm like, oh, okay, I understand it now. It's like, it's different than how we did it, but it's still, the way, the context that they're putting it is interesting. So that actually has kind of had an influence on me, is just, looking at those clothes again, that I sort of was like, oh, I'm never touching that ever again, and like seeing it, done in a new way. So, and then just having like, younger nieces and nephews, who are now like in their, are in college age, like 19, 20, and just seeing the stuff that they're into, and, the stuff they're throwing up on Instagram, that's always interesting for me too, just like to kind of follow the way that they're thinking and stuff. So, I mean, I do try to kind of like tap into that a little bit, but I feel like my roots, are still pretty, into like kind of like more, just the manual way of making things,
Really starting from scratch.
Yeah. Cause I like just the feel of it, I think it's something that I really enjoy. I mean, I have sort of started, it's weird. I started to make these like videos on iPhone. Now we're talking about this, I'm kind of thinking different, but like we were in California at my husband's parents' house, and I was just really bored, and I started playing with iMovie on my phone, and my husband and I were making sort of these little videos and stuff. And then I started to make these videos, and I started to kind of like collect just stuff of like the ocean or, traffic and stuff. And I started layering it. And that was kind of really interesting for me, just to see, play with that, because I had never really done it before. And I think like a lot of my work revolves around collage. I love layering things. And so that was sort of a new thing for me, is just like layering these collage, pieces, like making these videos together. And it was funny because my husband, he acts, and he was in a short film, and the director was like really stoked on the videos. And I was like, wow, okay, this seems to me very kind of like old style, the way that they look kind of, but I think it was just a different way, it's like I'm coming at it from a different point of view than a younger person would. So he was like really into them, which made me really excited. But I think like, that's kind of more, the way I've sort of used it is just kind of, maybe iMovie or, Photoshop, I finally figured out how to use stuff like that. But I do actually enjoy it when I figure it out, because it's just like I love problem solving. So it's just kind of interesting to kind of figure out how to come up with these solutions for like things that I don't know,
Do you see yourself as something of a trendsetter then?
Maybe back in the day. I don't know. No, I mean, no, I don't know. It depends, I guess. Because, now I'm like 49 years old. So it's like, I think back in the day, most, definitely just with the influence with the EIS and stuff. But I think like, I don't know, I hope that, I guess, I did an interview recently where I was talking about, the idea of getting older, and how, people kind of think like once you're older, you sort of lose this like, whatever cool thing you had happening, my feeling is like, why do you have to lose it? Like there's someone like a woman like Kim Gordon, who's like, still wearing shorts on stage. And I think she's like in her 70s or something, and she still looks great. She's still rocking out and stuff. And so it's like, I guess, I want people to see me in a similar light, where I'm like still going for it, and I'm not like being hindered by my age, so it's like, so I hope in that way, maybe so, that it could be kind of a different trend,
Well, punk has played a role in your life, hasn't it?
Yeah. A big role. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, when I first moved to New York, I remember reading about all of like, like the filmmakers and the bands and stuff here in New York, and just how they did it by themselves. They were all DIY, and that was like a huge influence for me.
Well, let's go back to your very early DIY days, because your mother was a DIY. You came from a less than privileged background, should we say?
Yes.
One of 6 children. Tell us about those early days and growing up in Iowa, and how you saw yourself as a child and where you fitted in with your siblings.
Well, I was the second, and I was the only girl in the family till my sister came along 12 years later. So I was sort of in the position where, I have a brother that's 7 years older than I am, but by the time my younger siblings, who are like 7, 9, and 12 years younger than I am, came along, he was kind of out of the house. So I was sort of put in the position of like, kind of taking care of everyone, being the older sister. And I grew up in a born again Christian household. So it was really expected for me to kind of like be a girl, act very feminine, and play the role of like a woman would play, and a mother would play, and, sort of that old style of like, the girls take care of the kids. And, so that is really how I grew up, is that way. And kind of being, my mother would always say, "Oh, Christiane Joy, you're my handmaiden from the Lord," which would just like totally like ruin me. I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be the handmaiden for the Lord, or like I had to have really long hair, because it was my covering for the Lord, and like things like this. And so I just was raised very religious, and my dad, he was like the 12th of 13 children. So all of he was born in 1940, but his siblings were all born in the 20s. So he still had this really strong idea of what a woman should be, and that a woman should never, like beat a man in anything, so I wasn't supposed to be like a better, athlete or like do anything that would kind of like make men feel lesser, so for me, that was like really difficult, because I was good at, I was really good at a lot of stuff. And it kind of got a little bit ignored, I think partially because of all the kids, and, they wanted me to take a different path, so that was hard. And then, our family was not exactly looked highly upon. And so I kind of always had this chip on my shoulder where I was like, well, I have to prove to people, here that my family is actually worth something. So that was like something that really, really pushed me forward.
And your mother, Connie, she was a housewife, and you said a born-again Christian.
Born-again Christian, yeah.
Yeah,
so
and I'm just wondering, with that, was your father equally as religious then? And were there principles and disciplines then that carried through your childhood from both of them?
Well, okay. This is the craziest story. I've never really told everybody this. I have told friends this story. Basically, when my parents met, I think my dad was out on parole from prison. And my mom was sort of like a real, she was very rebellious, like I had found, maybe during COVID, a newspaper article about her where she had been arrested for drag racing when she was like 17. So she met my dad and she got pregnant. And for whatever reason, my dad had to go back to prison. And my, being pregnant, at 19, and I don't know what year it would have been, 65, I guess, it wasn't really looked highly upon. So I think she was sent to like somewhere like Kentucky, to like, while she was pregnant. But then she called up my dad in prison and told him that she was going to give the baby up for adoption. And my dad, who was on like he must have been like in a work, I think he was like in a work area or something, walked off the prison yard. And according to my mother, there was a manhunt for him on television. He was finally caught in a cornfield after he had swam across a river. So it was like, so they, even though my mom was born again, I think that's the reason she became born again, because my dad was sort of in and out of prison for like a long time, till I was probably about, I don't know, maybe junior high or something. So he was not as he wasn't as religious as she was. His like way of thinking came more from like that old way of thinking, you know, of like the way women should act, the way men should act, you know. And so, I mean, because I remember him even saying, you know, my mom, you know, because she was born again, was like very anti-gay, and my dad saying to us, "Oh, you know, I work with gay guys. They're all right." You know, like, you know, and he's like, "Don't tell your mom I told you that." And we were like, but, you know, I think we'd already, for us kids, none of us were ever very religious. And I don't think we ever really followed that, even though it was like very, you know, once I left home, I did have a hard time kind of like leaving that way of thinking, you know, like that, that I was meant, you know, I mean, you know, it's a little cult like, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, so you're sort of like, you know, you grow up thinking that you're supposed to act a certain way and be the certain way and, you know, do things this certain way. Like I got married when I was 19 and I got divorced, and I remember thinking, oh, I better go do whatever I can because eventually God's going to make me go back to Iowa and go back to my husband. So it was like, that took a long time for me to get over, you know, I mean, that was a very hard thing to kind of go through. So, yeah, I mean, you know, on one hand, it's like you have this, like these people that are very rebellious, but sort of like trying to toe the line, you know, and so you're kind of like, it just makes things very, interesting, you know? So it's like, you know, I mean, my mom had this great story about how her and her friend were like trying to move a picnic table at a park. And this would have been when I was just a little kid, and how her and her friend prayed for an angel to come and help them move the park bench. And instead some Hell's Angels rolled up to like move it. So it's like, you know, it's just very kind of like this like contradictory sort of like way of like growing up, you know, where on one hand, you know, you're trying to be this like, just have someone who's trying to be this like really square born again Christian, but then has this like really like rebellious streak in them. So it worked out for the best, you know.
A case of be careful what you wish for then. With
yeah, totally. So, yeah.
But your mother was creative. She had to be, you know, in an old fashioned kind of way, I suppose. So what did you learn from her in terms of your DIY skills then as a child?
I mean, she just kind of figured out, you know, both of them actually, both of my parents, they just kind of did whatever they could to help us survive, you know? So I think like, you know, my mom, you know, my dad was always baking and, you know, doing things like that. And then they always had gardens and stuff. But then my mom she was like really, really into this idea of like the Great Depression, you know, how people lived through the Great Depression and how they would have to, I mean, we never made our own clothes, but like, you know, that idea of like a you know, dress being made out of a flour sack or, you know, things like that. So she kind of, you know, she kind of really made that part of our lives in a lot of ways, you know, like, okay, well, this is how you're going to do it if you don't have any money or, you know, because we didn't have any money. I mean, and they were trying to raise like 6 kids, you know, 5, I guess, because my brother had left by then, kids on like, you know, a very small amount of money. And so it was just, you know, interesting to kind of see like, it was just, you know, it's like survival skills kind of. And I think that's part of the reason why I was able to move to New York and sort of make it through those first couple of years where it was like, you know, I didn't have any money. I hardly ate, you know, and so I think like, you know, but that just knowing like, oh, you know, I'm going to be okay, you know, no matter what, you know, because I've lived through this before, you know, of like, you know, just, you know, like they would go to the grocery store. There was this grocery store that had like day old fruit, and we would go and my mom would sign up for it. It was $1 a box, but sometimes you'd get like 14 boxes of bananas, you know, so it would be like, they'd come down the street with like 14 boxes of bananas, like weighing down this little car, you know? So it's just all of, you know, stuff like that, you know, like, oh, let's make some mittens out of socks or, you know, and sometimes, you know, it was embarrassing, you know, when you're a kid, you're trying to be cool and you know, your mom's making all this stuff or, you know, she was kind of a hippie, you know, too. So it was like, it was very creative, you know, just in regards of like that you had to find these different ways to survive. So it was a real like, constantly problem solving, like I remember one time painting a room with my dad. We had gotten some pink paint at a garage sale, and we ran out of paint, and I said, oh, let's put Kool-Aid in it. And we dyed the paint with Kool-Aid. So it was like some, like that. So, and I remember as a little kid, like our pipes were always bursting because my parents had bought this house for like $12,000, and it was like built in the 1890s. So a lot of it was constantly falling apart. But one of my favorite things was when the pipes would burst under the sink in the kitchen to try to fix them, so it's just kind of stuff like that more, like, okay, well, I got to figure this out. Somebody's got to figure it out. So what are we going to do? Because we can't afford to pay anybody to do it. So it's just like learning a lot on the fly, and so I think that was a lot of it. And then also my mom wrote, so she wrote all the time. And, so that was, she made a couple books, which I actually haven't read because I'm a little afraid to read them. But that was kind of her thing, what she wrote. And then my dad, when we were growing up, was just this really amazing singer. He had this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful voice. So, the two of them were pretty, creative, but I think they were kind of hindered by the fact that, we were so broke all the time. But my mom definitely figured out ways around it,
Yeah. Do you know what she wrote about? Was it fiction, nonfiction, poetry?
She wrote about how to be a submissive wife and how to be a good wife for the Lord, basically. And like, how to be a good housewife and raise your children in a Christian way, So it's like, for me, it just like sends shivers down my spine, I don't really want to read it. My husband's read it because he reads everything, but like, and then, well, here's the funny part. She wrote everything on an email machine because she didn't have a computer. So an email machine would only give you a certain amount of words. Right. And so she would take the OUL, or, if it should, she'd take the OU out of it and just write SHUD. So it's also this like, which is almost like Twitter, right? So it's like, this like early kind of Twitter idea. So all her books have these insane misspellings that but then used to kind of make this character who was like, from the Appalachians, and like during the Great Depression, so it was like, so she kind of made the words kind of work for her. So it's just like, it's just totally insane. But now that I think about it, it's pretty genius, because it is sort of like, and that's what people try to do now. So,
Well, exactly. We're abbreviating everything these days. It reminds me of Anne Lister, the diarist Anne Lister, who had to be decoded because she wrote everything in code. And I'm wondering if one day that you have to decode your mother's memoirs, and who knows what they might reveal.
Oh my God, I don't even want to know. I'm sure it'll be something that I'm like, just want to die after I read it. But, it's just, it's like just a difference between, our ways of thinking. But I'm very proud of her. She was a unique human being, and she really lived her life in the way that she wanted to live it, and so just for that reason alone, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Totally. And I'm wondering how you fit in school then.
Well, I was an athlete, so I actually like fit in okay. But then it's funny because for years I was an athlete, and then I think I kind of got over it. And I had a friend whose sisters were really into like Depeche Mode and The Cure and U2 and stuff. And so I kind of started listening to a lot of music, and that sort of switched my interests, so I kind of went from being this like very like athletic kid and sort of a jock to sort of like becoming like, someone completely different. And I remember even like in high school, I got voted most changed in high school, I think my junior year or something, because I had just kind of flipped the script a little bit and decided I wanted to be a writer. Actually, I wanted to be a writer. And but I feel like I fit in okay, not in junior high, but I don't think anybody fits in junior high. Junior high is like the worst.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of an athlete were you?
I ran cross country and track and played basketball, but I was only allowed to do 2 sports. So once I got to high school, I just ran cross country and track. So I was like a long distance runner and stuff. So but that was because for some reason, when I was a kid, I just would run everywhere. So I never walked anywhere. I just ran. So I think that sort of I'd had those years of practice, you know.
What about your other interests? What were they mainly? What did you take away from school that was meaningful to you?
I was really, I guess, you know, I was really into writing a lot, you know, like I guess more in high school. And I was fortunate to have some good, you know, kind of creative writing teachers and stuff. So that was like you know, I wasn't a great student, honestly. I think like, math kind of went right over my head, and science I wasn't really into, but I really enjoyed history and I really enjoyed English class and stuff. And so based on, the English classes and the creative writing classes, I ended up going to the University of Iowa for just like one class in creative writing. And I remember doing pretty well in that. And I really thought, you know, that's probably what I was going to end up doing. But I kind of, once I moved to New York, I was like, for some reason, I was like, I don't want to be a writer. I want to be a visual artist. And so that kind of like, I put that on the back burner, which sort of disappoints me at sometimes, because I think like, well, I should have, you know, taken some more time and try to do that a little bit more. But, you know, it's something I guess I can try to pick up on again in the future. But as far as school went, I just wasn't really like into school. And, you know, I didn't end up going to, you know, in my family too, the whole thing was, well, either you go into the military or you get married and have children. And so I wasn't really encouraged to go to school. And I think I kind of got so confused by the whole idea of like how to even apply and do all of these things. And I just thought, you know, I can't afford it and everything. So I didn't even really bother. And I just, you know, so I sort of just skipped over it and just sort of went out on my own and, you know, started moving, you know, around, you know, so I moved to Chicago after I lived in, you know, in Iowa, and it wasn't really, and then when I was in Chicago, I went to Columbia College, which is kind of art school that, you know, is easy to get into. And I went for photography for a year. And, you know, I had a good teacher that, you know, liked what I did and stuff. But then, you know, I knew I didn't want to live in Chicago. I'd always wanted to live in New York. Even when I was a little kid, I remember thinking like, I have to move to New York. Something really great's going to happen to me when I move to New York. So that was always my goal, is to move to New York. So I think like the idea of staying in Chicago and being in school for, you know, 4 years was just didn't appeal to me. And I didn't even go to school till I was about 24, 23, I guess. So, yeah, so I just, you know, I ended up moving here, and then, once I moved here, I started working about a year into living here. I started working at different boutiques, and I remember thinking like, oh, I could do this. And I think I'd always had an inkling in the back of my head that I wanted to either be a designer or, you know, try something with fashion, you know? And, I kind of moved here at the most perfect time for that, because there was a lot of DIY kind of happening. And I think like, because of that, I got really inspired by sort of, you know, the other people around me, like Imitation of Christ and Libertine was another design duo that was doing stuff. And you know, I kind of thought, well, you know, if these people can do it, I can kind of do it too. And so I just started to kind of mess around with, you know, remaking clothes and stuff. And that's really where I got my start. And then once I started working with the EIS, you know, and I could see that they were getting ready to take off and, you know, really kind of make it big, I realized like, well, I should probably really learn how to do this, because I can't just make her costumes out of like, you know, newspaper and tape anymore. I need to actually know how to do this. So I started buying books on like pattern making and sewing and fashion history as well, because I was like, well, if I ever do an interview and someone asks me a question, I don't want to sound like an idiot. So I should really know what I'm talking about. So I basically just kind of taught myself all of that. And that's kind of how it has gone forward.
So how were you making a living whilst you were learning these skills?
I was working retail basically, and I wasn't making that much money. I was pretty broke all the time. but I worked first. I worked at this place called Antique Boutique that was over on Broadway and around Astor Place, and in that place, I met so many people, and I made a lot of friends working there, and that place carried like a lot of like young, cool, up and coming designers, and so I worked there for not very long because I got fired ultimately, but then I ended up working for this other smaller designer called Daryl Kay, who was like a very, she was kind of really in with like the downtown scene. And so I got a job working for her. And because of that job, I just sort of like, I don't know, I think I started to kind of see things in a different way. And, they gave me the opportunity to work at the fashion shows and stuff like that. And so I think, just working for a small designer and seeing how she worked, kind of gave me a lot of insight and stuff. And also that's, just working in retail, I met so many different people, and that's really how I met Karen even. And so it's like, I think there's a lot to be said for, just kind of being out there and sort of being amongst people, and talking to people. Cause it's like, that's really how I feel like I've gotten anything, any opportunities, it's just kind of being out and about and talking to people and trying things, so those were all important. But, working retail, I didn't really make that much money. I got free clothes, but fortunately my rent was cheap. I think it was $500 a month. So, it wasn't too bad, but that's kind of how I got started.
So what age would you have been then when you moved to New York?
I was 24 when I moved here. So I kind of consider myself a little bit of a late bloomer. Like, I just, cause even, by the time I was, working with EIS and stuff, I was about 28 years old, so, or maybe younger, 26, I can't remember, but like, so it just took me a long time, I think, cause, I kind of went about it in such a different way, of like, moving around, sort of learning to survive on my own and, kind of getting through all of that, I think, is like a big learning lesson, even, just figuring out how you're going to survive. And I remember like, I'd always wanted to move to New York, but I was a little scared because I was from such a small town. And I ended up, while I was going to school for that year, I got a work visa and I went to London and tried to work there. And then, ended up going to Edinburgh. And then I dated a guy for several years that was from Dublin. So then I moved over to Dublin. And so I think just doing that kind of like gave me the nerve that I needed to, move to New York. And I remember once I moved here, I felt like I just hit the ground, running. So, I think there was a lot of like, learning how to survive on my own and, knowing what I needed to do and thinking about it, for those like, whatever from the ages of like 20 to 24, so it was like, I think it worked in the way that it was meant to for me,
Yeah, I was going to ask you, where your confidence came from at that young age. Was that determination? Were you driven, or was it a matter, as you say, of survival, but also with the dream of becoming a designer and knowing that that was the path you wanted to take, even though it wasn't paved and waiting for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said before, like part of it was that I really had this feeling that I needed to show, I was really driven by this feeling that I needed to show all these people in Iowa who looked down on my family that my family was worth something. So that was like a really strong driving factor. I also just had this feeling that I was supposed to be doing something, and so it was sort of this search for what that was that I was supposed to be doing and kind of feeling it out and trying different things. And I think, I feel like one thing that I feel very lucky to have is a real sense of determination, and a real sense of like hard work, like I'm not afraid to kind of put in the hard work and just keep trying and kind of keep trying to move forward. And, and I think that's a lot to do with it, cause it's like, you can be great at something, but then, it might never come to fruition. I mean, some of that's like luck too, but I think like it is like sort of that determination to to succeed, and without being necessarily like, I don't know why my mind's going blank now. Without kind of being a jerk about it, and just trying, and seeing what kind of happens, like throwing spaghetti at the wall a little bit, So I think that's what it was, and I don't know. I had this instinct, I think, that like, something was moving me, propelling me forward and making me feel like I did have to do something because it was in the cards,
And a lot of this you figured out yourself because you're self-taught. And you mentioned there that maths wasn't your thing in school. So how did you work through all the, the design process and the mathematics that I'm sure they're involved in that?
Yeah.
Putting it all together.
Yeah. I think I think I just was taught math in the wrong way. It's like once, you start to like realize what geometry really is, like geometry, when they start telling me like X equals blah, 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 I was like, oh, I have no idea what that is. But like once, I started looking at, trying to learn to make patterns and stuff, it kind of started to make sense. But the funny thing was I kept wanting to find a book that was like, well, why is this like this? And of course it's like, well, because this is the shape of the body, but it's like, I just wanted to read something that said, well, this has to be like this because the body is shaped like this, and this body might be shaped like that, and that's why this has to be like that. So it was like a lot of it was like that I just wanted someone to explain it to me, in those terms, But yeah, I feel like I did end up learning a lot of math and teaching myself a lot. Because the thing is, I actually do really enjoy math, but it's just I think the way I was taught it, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. It was just so confusing for me and frustrating. I mean, I would just look out the window the entire time I was supposed to be doing a test because I just had no idea what they were even asking me, So I think it's just, you just like, you're able to teach yourself in the way you need to be taught and understand in the way that you need to be, figure it out. And so I think that's really what it came down to is I just, had to learn it on my own because I don't think necessarily. And also, I was very stubborn and I thought I knew everything. So I don't know if anybody actually taught me,
But you're just one piece of a puzzle, I suppose, as a costume designer. You rely on a team of people. And I'm wondering, who was your right hand then? Who were the people that were helping, or you wish could be, I don't know, whether you needed a manager or somebody to help you, steer and support you in the critical days of, getting all the logistics together and establishing yourself as a brand in yourself.
Right. I mean, everything I've ever done, we've done, here in my studio, so I've never, I did try to be a fashion designer for a little while. And then I was like, this is not really what I want, and I learned that pretty quickly. I also figured out that just doing custom costume design was probably going to be a little more lucrative because, it's like when you're doing a fashion design, I mean, you might as well just throw money out the window, so, and also I just kind of felt like, well, more than a fashion designer, I want to be an artist and I want to create these things that are memorable, like not necessarily like, the best shirt anybody's ever made, so, I mean, everything I do is done by me. And then I have an assistant, Caitlin, who, works with me when we have big projects. And so, it's just basically Caitlin and I. So we print everything. We, any of the like surface design, we do all that, all the sewing. So she's sort of the one that kind of actually, I have to say, kind of keeps me focused or, does the things that I don't want to do. And, I can't even actually always hire her, most of the time I'm on my own, but when I do have the opportunity to have her, it's great because she's been with me she's been with me actually since she was 18 and she was an intern. And then, I think now she's like almost 30 or something. So she's been great to have around. And she's really one of the only people that I kind of trust to have around me.
We often say that people come into our life for a particular reason. And it sounds like you got your lucky break when you met Karen O. Do you actually remember when you met her and did you hit it off for any particular reason at the start?
Yeah, I do. I remember her very well because I remember she used to come into the shop that I worked in, and this is before either of us were doing anything. So she was studying film at NYU, and I remember she would come in, and you know how she has the really long bangs now. She used to have the really short, you know, fringe. She used to have really short bangs, and I remember thinking, who is this funny, weird girl? You know, and like she would come in, and she was very shy, and she sort of talked to me, and I just kind of thought, you know, I wasn't really sure what to think about her, but I liked her, you know, and I felt like some odd connection to her. And I remember she didn't come in for a really long time. And I remember thinking, I wonder what happened to that weird girl that, you know, used to come in all the time. And then she started kind of coming back. And then I remember one day she came in with their first album, the master EP. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to listen to your stupid record. And then I listened to it and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I think, you know, whatever, you know, she had started the band, and that was about the same time I had started making clothes. And I was making these like kind of ripped up prom dresses because I lived across the street from a Salvation Army, and they were like $5 each. So I would just go in, and then I would sort of like, I had this one container of paint that I had stolen from work, this acrylic paint. So I would sort of paint everything, and I was just kind of messing around and selling the stuff in this store on the Lower East Side that was called Tim Tum. And the woman, Erica Lively, that owned Tim Tum, kind of is the first person that kind of really gave me an opportunity to sell my stuff. But Karen, anyway, saw one of the dresses that I had made, and it was called the Teenage Car Crash Dress. And I was really inspired at the time by John Waters. I just thought he was, you know, I mean, I still love John Waters, but so she saw that and said, hey, can you make me one of these for my show coming up? And so I made her one, and I remember it was so ugly. I mean, I made it in one night and brought it to the show the next day, and she didn't even have the chance to try it on or anything. And she got up on stage and wore it. And I just remember watching her on stage and watching the band. And I was like, and I immediately knew, oh, this is that thing that I moved to New York City for. This is it. It's happening, you know? And I could see her in my head on the cover of magazines. And I just, it was immediate that I could see it all happening. And it was just such a strange, special moment, you know, 'cause it just, you know, it was really odd to be able to identify a moment like that, you know, and just immediately have that feeling, you know, and that was just, you know, what happened. And, you know, and not long after that, they just started getting requests from like Rolling Stone and Spin and stuff. And so suddenly I was kind of thrown into, you know, having to like, you know, becoming this like costume designer, you know, which wasn't necessarily what I had ever foreseen, you know, and then I, you know, after that, I started getting calls from like Women's Wear Daily and stuff. And I was like, are these people, I just thought it was hilarious. I thought like, these people must be smoking crack, because this is like the weird, like, this doesn't look like anything that belongs in Women's Wear Daily. And I just thought it was hysterical. Like I'd get home and like have you know, it was a time when, you know, we still had home phones, not even cell phones yet. And I'd have these messages from like, you know, different magazines. And I just thought like, wow, I don't know how this happened, but all right. You know, so it was really interesting. The whole process was, and I think because I was able to kind of like, I just thought it was so ridiculous, you know, that I just was able to go with it, you know, but I mean, it's amazing. It's been an amazing journey, you know, so I feel very fortunate.
Well, clearly, you know, the liftoff that you needed for your career, and you grew together. You inspired one another, didn't you? It was really at that critical point of both of your careers.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, she's such, I mean, I think for, you know, especially for all of the women that I knew at that time, like having someone like her on stage too was just like, you're like, oh, thank God. Like, you know, it was just like, we would just go so crazy. I mean, all of us girls would come back like bruised and like dirty, and just from just being up, you know, at the front of the stage. And I think like, you know, that was really inspiring just to see somebody who was like really this woman, you know, kind of just, you know, going so hard and, you know, she was just, now she's like kind of calm. I mean, now we're all a little older, but before, I mean, it was just like watching a train wreck, but it was so great. I mean, the energy was just phenomenal, so definitely that all inspired me, and I know, like she said in the past, like, when she puts the costumes on is when she feels like she really turns into Karen O. So, it's been great. And I love her to death. And I love seeing her, kind of move forward and how she creates. And I think she's a brilliant creator, and yeah, it's been, you couldn't ask for more, I guess.
And an important collaborator for you in your career. And, when people put on a costume, it can be transformational, right? And
yeah,
I guess every time you watch her or anyone that you've dressed, you're hoping they feel that when they put the costume on, that they feel they're transformed into what they want to become.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a real treat to be able to do that and just like see people and perform. And, I mean, that's such an interesting, just like relationship with just, the performer and costumes, designer. Cause it's like, I mean, I think, you have to really like have, I don't know how anybody has like that nerve to even get on stage and like, express themselves that way. It's just like, I tried it once and I was like, no way, So it's, it's incredible to get to be part of that process, but not actually have to like get up on stage myself,
But being backstage, being behind the scenes, it's rather like, as your friend Akiko would say, unless an illustrator or designer is freelance, if they're part of an ad agency, it's rather like being part of a team. You don't get the credit and the recognition. You don't even get the name recognition. So was that a hindrance for you in a way, or was Karen able to help you, put your name out there? And so that you got the other work that you did. I know you worked with Alabama Shakes and of course many others. So I'm wondering how that fits for you, because you didn't want to be the front girl. But being backstage also comes with the price of being anonymous, which at the start of a career can be hampering.
Yeah, no, I mean, part of the amazing part is that Karen used to yell my name from stage all the time. So that's really like right from the beginning. I remember her, and I would stand in the audience and be so embarrassed, but she would say, "Hey, do you like my outfit? This is Christiane Joy." And then she would yell my name over and over again on the microphone. And I would just be like dying, but so she actually like was very about putting my name out there right from the beginning, which was pretty incredible, and making me really feel like part of it, and so I think just that, kind of set was extremely helpful. And then it's strange because for years I never got any work like beyond Karen. And I remember talking to a publicist and saying, why don't I ever, and I was trying to get styling jobs and I was trying to be a fashion designer and all this stuff, and nothing was really panning out. And I just wasn't interested in it. And I said, why don't I ever get any work with anyone else? And they said, oh, because everyone's worried they're going to look like Karen. And I said, well, I could do other stuff, And so a friend of mine who used to be the EIS publicist reached out to me about Brittany from Alabama Shakes. And she said, do you know anybody that would want to dress Brittany? And I said, well, and I remember hearing her and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I'll do it. Also, I love like working with women who, maybe aren't necessarily the like, like the usual kind of women that people would want to work with, like I like them when they're quirky, they're a little funny, like, just women, women like that I would know, so it was like, so I find it to be a real, I really was like excited to work with her. And I mean, her voice is just insane. And so it was like, the opportunities I got working with them was just like amazing. I mean, I got to do the Grammys, and I got to do like make her an outfit that was like she wore at the White House, with Obama. I mean, that was like really cool. And for her outfits, I worked with an amazing tailor, and for some of Karen's like later like the suits and stuff, I worked with an amazing tailor, a friend of mine, Choi. So for stuff like that, I kind of need, someone that can kind of help me. But Curie was like definitely an amazing asset to have around, because I just don't think I could have visualized like a lot of that, without her.
Well, now, of course, you have had that recognition. You know, you've been in so many major publications, and not least of all the Rolling Stone that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And also exhibited at major museums as well. So I'm wondering how important that kind of public recognition is for you at this stage in your career.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the unfortunate thing for me is I'm not really like, my goal has never been money. And I wish it was, because really what I just always wanted was sort of the recognition, you know? And so, and not that I, you know, need to be like super famous, but like just to have people like look at my work and think like, oh, wow, that's amazing, you know, or I really love her work, or, you know, that's more important to me than, you know, anything else. So it's like, you know, that means a lot, you know, to get to do, you know, shows and you know, show my work and have people enjoy it, you know? So, I mean, that's always been what I've wanted the most out of it all. It's just that I would be recognized as an artist or a designer, you know, however people, I guess, see me. But, yeah, that I would kind of figure it out on my own, you know, I think was like what was important to me, you know, more than anything else.
So that's how you would define success then, and get the most satisfaction.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I wish that I would define success on making money, but it's just not. I mean, it's not really how I see it. I just, I just really wanted the recognition for what I did, you know. And I think like, you know, just to, you know, because I think so much about like history a lot, and like, you know, historical figures, or how you could fit into like history, you know, and like, you know, there's a lot of people that are lost to history who were like so incredible, like during their lifetimes, and then, you know, have been lost to history for whatever reason. But I like this idea of like fitting into like kind of this, to a lineage, you know, so like almost like fitting into like that New York City lineage, you know, is like always been kind of important to me, you know, because that was such a huge influence, where like the people who were creating things in New York, you know, so to me, that was like something that I've always really wanted is to kind of have that. And, you know, I think I have kind of gained that, which is, you know, great, but it's like, yeah, I think that's something that's always been a goal, you know, basically.
And which part of the process do you get the most thrill out of now when you're starting a piece?
I love printing, screen printing. So that's my favorite part. I love creating like the most, you know, like her most recent look kind of has a lot of KOs all over it and stuff. I love like the graphic part of it, you know, like creating a graphic and creating a print, you know. It's just like, I love the, like, you know, figuring out the combinations of words or images, or, you know, it's all a collage, you know. It's like going back to that again. It's like, it's just like this collaging of like ideas and colors and shapes. And it's just my favorite thing to do. You know, it's just like, I find it really satisfying. And you know, it's funny because it's like, I've actually started to enjoy sewing, because I never really liked sewing. But I've finally, like, you know, kind of gotten into it. And so that's kind of a new thing for me too, and learning how to collage fabric, you know, like almost like quilting and stuff. So, but really hands down, it's the printing part for me.
How would you describe the style of what you produce? Is there a way to describe it, or is it constantly evolving? So it's not something you can put a name to.
Well, you know, it's funny because the little girl next door that lives next door to us, she's like 7 years old, and she'll see her mom will be scrolling through Instagram, and she'll know right away that it's something that she sees as my work, you know, or she'll see things and she'll say, hey, that looks just like Christian, you know. So I think, even though I might not know how to identify it, obviously, you know, it's like there's something identifiable. I think it's just, I think I would, you know, like that it's always very graphic and colorful, and, you know, I try to, you know, really what I want is for people to feel happy when they look at my work. You know, I want them to feel like a sense of joy, the sense of joy that I had creating it, you know? And so, and I think, you know, like being a kid in the 80s, you know, it's like I was really influenced by pop music and pop culture, and, you know, like just the styles and everything like that. And that's never really left me. So it's like, you know, all of those like wild colors and wild, shapes and graphic combinations is something that's always been really important to me. So I think that's definitely always in my work, is just that. But mostly, I hope that people will feel happy or feel like they have something unique, when they look at it.
And is that your dress style too? Is the color very colorful, vivid, vibrant colors and a little bit of glitter?
Yeah, I try. Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing in the whole world is getting dressed. So I don't wear a lot of black, I have to say. I tend to love a print and a color. And lately I've been really into kind of this neoclassical, way of dressing. I got this one piece and I was like, wow, I just want to dress like this all the time. But I love fashion history and stuff so much. So, and I definitely get dressed from the point of view of a costume designer of because my husband and two friends of ours opened a gallery space recently. And so now in my mind, when I have to go to the space, I think to myself, okay, who am I today? I'm wearing this 1930s dress with all this silver jewelry. I'm feeling very Georgia O'Keeffe, or so I kind of always identify a character in how I dress. So it's I keep telling them if we really become somehow gallerists, I'm going to start wearing Armani suits or, all this, so it's just that's basically how I get dressed. But yeah, I love a lot of color. I mean, I don't feel good if I don't have some sort of color. And I always have, a big earring or I love jewelry, just the more kind of bold and whimsical, kind of just stuff that would, people, it's funny. I don't like to be on stage, but I really like, being identified for the way I dress, So
you relish the idea of going to openings and.
Well, I don't go to openings so much, but I guess when I go out, when I'm out in New York, I want somebody. I always try to dress for it. I'm not really every once in a while, I'll go out in a t-shirt and shorts or whatever, but it's not real. It doesn't feel very me to do that. I always feel like I need a little something that really. I feel like my style really is a strong identification of who I am, so right. It's something that's very, very important to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine that when you step out, so to speak, you want that to represent who you are, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's definitely something that's and I think I've started, there's something about turning I'll be 50 in December, about becoming a little older where I'm you know what? I'm just going to totally go for it. I don't even care anymore. Whereas, I think when you're younger, you're trying to be cool and I still want to be cool, but it's but I have this different feeling of things now where I'm I don't know. I just want to try things, it's a different sort of confidence, I guess, that you have when you get a little older, but it's I don't know. It's just, trying to figure that out and really turn it into something and make something out of it for myself. But yeah, I mean, getting dressed is definitely, over anything else I do, my favorite thing.
You can be as rebellious as you were as a teenager then.
Yeah, definitely.
You giving yourself permission now. As you
yeah, totally. Yeah, it's super fun.
So we talked about your, music as being an important part of, obviously, your creative life, your personal life too. What would you be listening to if you're working?
I listen to a lot of books and podcasts, actually. I really love listening to a good, murder mystery while I'm working. But my husband's a musician. And so we always kind of have music on in the house. And lately he's kind of been playing a lot of, I think what I've been more into recently has been sort of almost jazz and world music, but then I always go back to I was thinking, I actually made a list this morning of stuff, but I always love kind of the Yaz or Fun Boy 3 or bands like that. It's just kind of I don't know. I feel like my music choices haven't really advanced, except for the fact that now it's there's a label called Mississippi Records where we listen to a lot of music off of that, and it's kind of a little more obscure kind of music and stuff. I I think music from other countries and stuff is what I really have been enjoying the most lately. Cause it's, I don't know, I think I've seen so many bands and stuff that like, it's just not been something that, rock music is not something that appeals to me as much as anymore. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
you've grown out of it.
Yeah, a little bit. And I still hear stuff that I love, but I think more kind of, Caribbean music or, we have like records from Iran or, you know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. It's just like, but it's such a different sound. And so it's kind of has, it really, especially there's this Iranian record that we have where they're just, the music, you're just like, it gives you just this like ecstatic feeling, of like, oh my God, what is this? It's just like, that's kind of what I'm looking for more is sort of that, like that feeling of like something that sounds, just totally different, or that I haven't heard before. And especially when, you hear somebody singing in a different language, I think it's always kind of like, makes your brain go into different places. And so that's kind of what I've been enjoying the most lately.
And finally, what's next for you, or what are you working on now and looking forward to?
I have a show coming up in September. So as I said before, we started a new, my neighbors and my husband and I opened a space called Neighbors, and it's in the Chinatown Mall. It's at 75 East Broadway on the second floor. And we kind of opened it as just like a space where each one of us gets to curate something different, so like I guess each of us does something like 3 times a year. And so in August we have like a t-shirt show coming up where it's just going to be all t-shirts. And then in September I'm doing a show, and I'm doing it with this photo duo that I work with a lot called Ulex. So I'm going to create a costume and they're going to create photos, and I'll probably do like some backdrop kind of things too. And so that's what that's going to be in September. So I kind of need to get my house in gear and really get that going. But so that's what I have coming up.
And any long-term ambitions now? Do you have a bucket list?
Not so much. I guess I kind of really learn, my life's always been kind of like living day to day, kind of trying to figure it out, I want to travel more. I think that's a big one, it's doing a lot, it's traveling and but other than that, maybe, I don't know, just, kind of keep doing, I guess, what I'm doing, and just, I enjoy my life. I really, really enjoy my life. I feel so happy, and I have a great partner and stuff. So, I guess, I don't know. I've never, even though I moved to the future, I don't always set goals for the future, I guess. So, I think just kind of trying to see what I can do next, and just sort of feeling it out, kind of going with the flow. As this friend of mine told me years ago, she said, Christian, just go with the flow. And that kind of became a thing that I just always kind of followed. It's just like, go with the flow, so
it's worked for you.
Yeah. So that was it. That, I don't know if she knows that I remember that, but that meant a lot to me when she told me that, so yeah, that's kind of how I've tried to do things.
How about teaching? Do you like the idea of teaching?
I do. I've taught a little bit here and there, and I like working with young people. Actually, I really enjoy people who are in their 20s, or in their like late teens, early 20s. I think I just like seeing how they're doing things and the way that they're thinking and stuff. So I've taught like younger kids, and I'm trying to think last time I have taught like kids, more in their 20s and stuff. But I enjoy it. I've never really gone out of my way to try to do it, but, I'm always open to it, just trying to, I guess, show them new ways of, I don't know, they'll probably teach me new ways of thinking, but, I think, there's a lot to be said for like, old and new combined,
Yeah. Well, whichever way you go, I'm sure there'll be a lot more colour in your life, colourful costumes, and a lot more to look forward to. Christiane, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it as well.
And if you'd like to see more of Christiane's work, you can find a link to her website and social media in the show notes accompanying this episode. And you can also follow us on social media. On Instagram, we're at The Art Podcast. That's art with 2 A's. And you can leave us a message there too if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for guests. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have a moment whilst you're on Apple Podcasts to leave us a review, we would love that too, because that helps others find the show. I'll be back next week, so I do hope you'll join me then.